She bled on her wedding night, and instead of anger, he whispered something that made her burst into tears. That night, everything changed, not just for her, but for the billionaire who thought he had everything, until he discovered the one thing he never knew he was missing. The rain drummed gently on the windows of the Charleston Museum of Culture as Elijah Rowe, 35-year-old billionaire and CEO of Rotech Industries, stood before a canvas unlike any he'd ever seen. The painting was modest, no gold frame, no famous name, yet something about it froze him in place. A girl stood under a tattered umbrella, sharing her sandwich with a street dog in the pouring rain. She had bare feet, but a radiant smile. The brushwork wasn't perfect, but the emotion, it was overwhelming. It wasn't part of the main auction. It was tucked away in the corner, labeled only with a handwritten note, donated by EVM. Age 22, a painting about choosing kindness, even when no one sees it. Elijah read it twice. He didn't know then that this canvas would lead him to the most life-altering decision of his life. Elijah Rowe didn't usually attend charity events. His assistant, Brian, had all but begged him, "It's for homeless youth, sir. It'll look good, but I think it might actually feel good too." Elijah scoffed at the idea of feel good. His life wasn't built on feelings. It was structured, calculated, an empire built by surviving pain. After losing his parents at 16 and being shuffled through foster homes, Elijah taught himself never to depend on kindness. He built walls, not bridges, until tonight. Evie Monroe, 22, tightened her grip on the paint-stained portfolio under her arm. Her blue thrift store dress clung to her skin from the rain, and the folded umbrella in her hand dripped on the marble floor. "Don't be nervous," she whispered to herself. "You're not here to impress millionaires. You're here for the kids." Evie wasn't rich. She was barely making ends meet teaching art classes at the local shelter. But tonight, she had donated her best piece, the one she had painted after her own darkest night. The one about feeding the dog, because on the night she had no food and no family, a stranger gave her a sandwich and smiled. That moment saved her. She wanted her painting to remind someone else. Kindness matters. Evie was in the back corner, fixing a crooked display, when Elijah approached. Their eyes met briefly, and for a moment, neither spoke. "Then, you painted this?" he asked, his voice low and even. Evie turned, blinking. "I did. I wasn't sure they'd even display it." "It doesn't belong in a gallery," Elijah said coldly. Evie's face dropped. "But that's because it belongs somewhere more important," he continued. "Somewhere people can actually see it." Evie smiled shyly. "That's kind of you to say." Elijah extended his hand. "Elijah Rowe." She hesitated, then shook it. "Evie Monroe. Just a community art teacher." "Don't say just," he said unexpectedly. "You've made more impact with one painting than I've done with 10 patents." Evie was stunned. Most rich men looked past her. This one looked into her. A few days later, a sleek black car pulled in front of the art shelter where Evie volunteered. "Miss Monroe," the driver said, handing her an envelope. "Mr. Rowe requests your presence at the Rotech Foundation Gala this Friday." She opened the envelope, an invitation with her name engraved, and a handwritten note. "I'd like you to present your painting, and maybe you save a few more people like you did me." Elijah, her hands trembled. No one had ever written her name so carefully before. Evie showed up in a borrowed gown. She looked like a painting herself. Elijah was waiting for her with a smile no one had ever seen him wear, not his board, not his staff, not even himself. They danced once, they laughed once, and in that one night, Elijah knew something terrifying. He felt something real. A week later, he showed up at the shelter with flowers and a question. "Marry me," he said. Evie nearly dropped her paintbrush. "What? Not now, not tomorrow, but soon. I've built things my whole life, but I've never built something with someone. Until I met you." She thought he was joking, but he in single quotes he offered no ring, only sincerity. And she said yes. The wedding was quiet, no press, no luxury, just them, a lake house, and the stars on their wedding night. Evie stood trembling in her nightgown. She wasn't just nervous, she was scared. "I need to tell you something," she whispered. Elijah reached for her hand gently. "You don't have to explain anything." "No," she said. "I want to. I'm a virgin, and tonight, I'm scared not because I don't trust you, but because I do." Elijah's breath caught, not out of frustration, but because it was the first time someone trusted him with their truth. What happened next would shock even Evie as she sat on the edge of the bed, eyes filled with tears. Elijah did something no one expected. He knelt beside her, and he whispered, "Then I will not touch you until you ask me to, not out of pressure, but out of peace, because I will never take more than you're ready to give." Evie began to cry not from fear, but from safety. That night, Elijah didn't undress her. He simply held her, and for the first time in her life, Evie slept in someone's arms and felt safe. The silence of the lake house the morning after their wedding was unlike anything Evie had ever experienced. It wasn't awkward, nor was it heavy. It was soft, comforting, almost sacred. Sunlight poured through the linen curtains, bathing the room in gold. She stirred beneath the sheets, half afraid to open her eyes, terrified that everything had been a dream. But when she turned, Elijah was sitting on the chair across from the bed, wearing a plain white t-shirt and gray pajama pants. No watch, no phone, just him. He had made her tea. The steam curled gently into the air, as if the morning itself had taken a deep breath and exhaled peace. He looked up when she moved, his face calm and still, but his eyes, those deep, thoughtful eyes, held a question, not a demand, not expectation, just a silent, respectful question. "Are you okay?" Evie nodded, the lump in her throat too big to speak around. No one had ever waited for her to be ready for anything. And then he said it, just 5 words that reached deeper than any vow ever could. "You don't owe me anything." It wasn't romantic. It was real. The kind of real that makes you question every fake kindness you ever accepted before. She didn't know whether to cry or smile, so she did both. They had breakfast together at the long wooden table facing the lake. She wore his oversized flannel shirt and tucked her legs under her, like she did at the shelter's art room when teaching kids to paint. Elijah didn't say much, and Evie liked that. She didn't need to be dazzled by words. His presence was louder than anything. By the time evening fell, they were sitting on the porch swing. The air smelled like pine and fresh rain. Evie found herself telling him stories about her childhood, about the painting she'd sold to buy shoes for her student, about the time she was almost evicted but ended up winning a mural contest the day before. Elijah listened as if every sentence she spoke was worth $1 million. But then came the question she had feared, gently, not forcefully. "What about your family?" The swing stopped moving. The wind stopped, or at least it felt like it. Evie looked at the stars instead of him. "They're gone. Not passed away, just gone." He waited. She continued, "My mother left when I was 9. My father, he was kind until he wasn't. He lost his job, started drinking. I ran away at 17, slept in shelters. I worked cleaning houses, washing dishes, anything. I never finished college. I never had birthday parties. But I never stopped painting." Her voice cracked near the end. She hated that. She didn't want to sound weak. But Elijah didn't reach for her like a hero. He simply whispered, "I'm sorry. And then, that should never have been your story." She turned to look at him, expecting pity. But there was none, only quiet, respectful anger at the world that had wronged her. And something else, admiration. "You still chose kindness," he said. "That's the part that amazes me." Evie wanted to tell him something in return. She wanted to ask, "Why me? Why did you choose me when you could have had anyone?" But before she could, the stillness was broken by the distant ring of his phone. He ignored it at first, then it rang again. "I'll be right back," he said, stepping inside. Evie leaned back and looked at the sky. She didn't hear the words exchanged inside. But something shifted, something small, almost invisible. When Elijah returned, his smile had dimmed just a little. She noticed. She always noticed the small changes in people. When you grow up learning to anticipate someone else's moods for survival, you learn quickly. He sat beside her again, but this time he didn't swing. "Everything all right?" she asked. "It's just a board meeting I'd hoped to avoid." Some internal issues I need to address back at the office. Her heart fell. She knew this life came with complications. Still, she had hoped their peace would last just a little longer. He looked at her, as if reading her thoughts. I'll only go for a day. You can come with me. But Evie shook her head. No, you go. I'll stay here and paint. I think this place it heals. He nodded, but as he kissed her forehead, good night, something lingered between them, not distance, but a whisper of old habits creeping back in. Work, control, pressure. The next morning, he left. Evie spent her hours painting on the dock, using an old wooden easel Elijah had found in the basement. She painted the lake, the porch swing, a red robin that kept landing near the railing like it was checking on her. But her mind kept drifting back to Elijah. Who was he before the money? She had seen glimpses, the gentle way he'd cradled her hand, the reverence in how he spoke about kindness, but there was something behind his eyes, a past maybe even he didn't fully understand. 2 days passed, no call, only a brief text. I'm trying to come back, just handling something personal, don't worry. That's when she heard the knock. It wasn't Elijah. It was a woman, early 40s, tall, pale, wearing a steel gray dress and heels that didn't sink into the gravel driveway, as if even the earth obeyed her. I'm looking for Mr. Rowe, she said coolly. Evie froze. He's not here right now. I'm his. I know who you are, the woman interrupted. The art girl. She said it the way someone might say, the stray cat. I'm sorry, and you are? I'm Madeline Roth, Elijah's executive advisor, and more importantly, the woman who's been cleaning up his messes for over 10 years. Evie stood a little straighter. I wasn't aware there were messes to clean. Madeline raised an eyebrow. You don't know, do you? Know what? Madeline looked around, then leaned in with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. You think this marriage was about love? Evie didn't respond. Madeline continued. Elijah has a contract to uphold, a merger with the Bexley family. The wedding was supposed to be with Alina Bexley, and then you happened. Evie blinked. A merger? Business, Madeline said, checking her nails. Love isn't required. Compatibility is. Influence is. Legacy is. Evie's heart raced. He never mentioned any of this. Well, Madeline shrugged. Perhaps he meant to tell you. Or perhaps you were just a temporary escape from the inevitable. With that, Madeline handed her a thin envelope. This is what's at stake if he walks away from the merger. Millions. Possibly billions. You should understand sometimes love stories cost more than people can afford. She turned and left. Evie didn't open the envelope. She didn't cry. She just stood there, staring at the lake, which suddenly looked colder than before. When Elijah returned later that night, he found her in the studio, painting furiously, tears streaking her cheeks, but not falling. I missed you, he said, stepping toward her. She turned, and the painting came into view. It was of two people on opposite sides of a bridge, close, but not quite able to reach Elijah. She said softly, did you marry me to escape something, or because you chose me? The silence between them wasn't long, but it felt like an hour, and in that space, her heart filled with a terrible doubt. Then, softly, he said, both. Evie stepped back. I didn't lie to you, he added, but I didn't tell you everything. I wasn't trying to trick you. I was trying to protect something I didn't understand yet. Us, me, you. She bit her lip. You mean the Bexley merger? He looked startled. Who told you? Does it matter? Yes, it does, he said firmly, because that deal never mattered to me. It was Madeline's plan, my board's plan. I've been resisting it for months. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to lose you before I even had the chance to be worthy of you. She looked at him, eyes wide. You think I'm not scared? He said, stepping closer. You think I didn't feel like a fraud when I saw how much you trust and hope and believe in people? I've spent years closing myself off, Evie. I don't even know how to love the right way, but I want to learn with you. Her hands trembled. And if you want to walk away now, he said, voice cracking, I won't stop you. Because you deserve the truth, all of it. She stood there, torn between everything she feared and everything she dreamed. Then she whispered, you already are worthy. Just don't hide from me again. And in that moment, something changed between them, not the fairy tale kind of love, but the kind of love that walks through truth and stays anyway. Asterisk, she hadn't meant to find the letter. It was tucked beneath the drawer lining in his study desk, hidden under documents so pristine and polished that even dust seemed intimidated. Evie had been searching for a pen, just a pen, but found the corner of a faded envelope sticking out like a forgotten sigh. Her hands hesitated. She wasn't the kind of woman who invaded private spaces, but something about that letter felt alive, almost as if it was waiting to be read. It wasn't addressed to anyone, just 3 words written in trembling cursive: "If I disappear." Her breath caught. She opened it slowly, and what she found wasn't business. It wasn't polished or rehearsed like most things in Elijah Rowe's life. It was raw. "I don't know when you'll read this, maybe never, but if I vanish, if I walk away from everything, don't believe it was because of weakness. Believe it was because I couldn't carry the weight anymore. Not of expectations, not of lies. I am not the man the world built me to be. I am the scared little boy who waited every Friday on the front steps, hoping his father would remember to come. I am the kid who learned to smile through silence, charm through pain, and build empires to feel something, anything. But even now, with all the power in the world, I still ache for a voice to say, you matter, Elijah. Not what you build, not what you fix, you." The letter ended there, no signature. Evie sat back, trembling. It was as if she had just touched the soul of a man who had spent his entire life pretending he didn't have one. Elijah wasn't in the house when she found it. He had driven to the city to handle final details of walking away from the merger, something she hadn't asked him to do, but something he had promised himself he would do. For the first time, not because of legacy or pride, but because of love, real love. And she, in that quiet moment, finally saw him not as a billionaire, but as a boy who had never been seen. The next morning, he returned with a tired smile and 2 cups of coffee. Evie met him on the porch steps, letter in hand. He froze. "You read it," he said quietly. "I wasn't looking for secrets," she replied just as softly. He sat down beside her, staring at the trees. For the first time, she noticed the way he cracked his knuckles when nervous. "I wrote that years ago, after my mother died," he said. "She was the only soft thing in my world. When she passed, I snapped, but I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I worked and built. I thought if I built something big enough, she'd see it. From heaven or wherever she went." His voice broke slightly. "I haven't let anyone read that. Not even myself, I think," she whispered. "You wanted someone to find it. One day." He looked at her then, not the way people look at someone they love, but the way they look at someone who finally understands. And understanding, Evie had learned, was rarer than love. Over the next few weeks, things changed between them, not dramatically, but gently. Elijah began to stay home longer, pushing back meetings to sit with her as she painted. Sometimes he watched in silence. Other times, he picked up a brush himself and created strange abstract things she gently teased him about. They cooked together well. She cooked, and he mostly burned toast, but it made them laugh. And laughter had become their new wealth. But not everyone was pleased. Madeline returned, this time not with papers but with warnings. "You think you can just walk away from your responsibilities?" she said sharply as Elijah met her outside the gallery Evie had just been accepted to show her work in. "I'm not walking away. I'm choosing what matters," he said without hesitation. "You're risking everything." "No. I'm finally investing in something real." Madeline's face hardened. "You think this is love? But you've built your life on structure, numbers, control. Don't forget what happens when you lose it." "I'm not losing control," he replied. "I'm letting go of fear." Madeline stepped closer. "And what happens when she sees the other side of you? The one that doesn't sleep, the one that spirals when things fall apart, the one that can't be held together by her soft voice and gentle hands?" There was silence. Then Elijah said something no one expected, not even himself. "Then I hope she helps me build a new version, one that doesn't have to pretend anymore." Madeline left without another word. Evie watched from across the street. She hadn't heard the conversation, but she'd seen everything in his posture, the tension, the decision, the freedom. That night, as they walked hand in hand through a moonlit park, she stopped beside a quiet bench. I want to tell you something," she said, squeezing his hand. "The night we got married, I wasn't just scared because it was new. I was scared because I thought maybe you'd see me and change your mind. I did see you," Elijah said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "That's why I didn't." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I've never belonged anywhere, Elijah. Not really. I think I was always waiting to be sent away." "You're not going anywhere," he whispered. "Not unless it's my arms you're running into." The wind moved through the trees like a song written for just them, and for the first time in both their lives, the future didn't feel like a test. It felt like an open door. But the past was not done with either of them. Days later, a call came from a law firm. A will had surfaced left by Elijah's mother, one no one knew about, and in it, she left behind a final request, not of money or legacy, but of love. "I want my son." The letter read, "To find someone who doesn't need his power, only his presence, someone who sees the boy inside the man and still stays. And if you're reading this, Elijah, and she's with you, then you found her. Don't let go." The lawyer handed him a small velvet box. Inside it was a paintbrush, old, worn, with dried blue streaks. "She used to paint," Elijah said, almost in a whisper. "I'd forgotten." Evie took the brush in her hand, tears rising in her throat. Maybe she didn't. In that moment, Elijah understood. His mother had known him, even at the end, and somehow, through the quiet echoes of time, she had met Evie, without ever laying eyes on her. Later that night, Elijah found Evie asleep on the couch, a blanket barely covering her shoulders. The paintbrush sat beside her, and on the canvas across the room was a new piece, a little boy standing on a hill, looking at a glowing house in the distance, its windows full of light. Underneath it, written in Evie's delicate hand, "He came home and someone left the light on." Elijah didn't wake her. He just knelt beside her, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You are my light." She never imagined that a box of children's drawings would shake her world. It was a rainy afternoon when Evie visited Lincoln Elementary, the school where she once volunteered before she met Elijah. A teacher named Mrs. Hunt, now retired, had found an old dusty art box in the back of the storage closet. She smiled warmly as she handed it to Evie. "These were yours," Mrs. Hunt said. "I thought you might want them, from the time you helped those quiet kids express what they couldn't say with words. You were good with them, Evie. Still are, I bet." Evie opened the box slowly. Inside were dozens of faded pages, each one drawn by a child who had carried pain in small, fragile shoulders, sunsets with no people, houses with no windows, stick figures crying in the rain. But they had also drawn hope balloons lifting off into the sky, hands reaching for stars, open doors, and then she saw it. A folded paper with the name Eli in bold, uneven pencil letters. Eli. She remembered him now. He was the boy who barely spoke, the one who sat alone during lunch, who only painted in blue and black, who always looked out the window, waiting. For what? No one knew. Her hands trembled as she opened the paper. It was a house with one window glowing gold, and next to it, a stick figure holding a sign that said, "Mom said I'm worth something." Suddenly, a memory came back to her in a rush. She had been 20, volunteering part-time. A little boy named Eli had shown up for 3 weeks, then vanished. No records, no goodbye. Just gone. She had asked around. No one knew who he was. She looked closer at the drawing, and her heart still died in the bottom corner. A tiny name scribbled in small letters. Elijah R.No. It couldn't be. But everything, his silence, his childhood wounds, the way he looked at her painting the first night they met, it all clicked. He was that boy. The one who couldn't speak but drew to survive. The one she had once given a sandwich to and told, "You're more than what people forget." He had been right there, in her past, long before he knew her name. She drove home in a daze, the box on the seat beside her like a fragile secret waiting to be unwrapped. When she arrived, Elijah was in the studio, attempting to fix a crooked frame. He turned and smiled. "You're back early." Evie didn't say anything at first. She held out the drawing. He took it slowly, eyebrows knitting as he looked at it. Then something shifted in his expression. A slow, quiet unraveling, recognition. Shock, grief, memory. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "You drew it. At Lincoln Elementary. I found it today. Do you remember me?" He looked up, and there it was in his eyes. "I remember your voice," he said hoarsely. "I didn't know your name, but I remember you. You sat beside me when no one else did. You didn't ask me to talk. You just waited." Tears filled her eyes. "You disappeared. I always wondered what happened to you. I was taken to another home. It was sudden. I ran away a few months later and never looked back." He stared at the drawing again. "I kept this house in my head for years. Every time I felt like giving up, I'd close my eyes and imagine that window, the gold light, the warmth. I didn't even know it came from you." Neither of them spoke for a long time, and then he said the one thing Evie didn't expect. "I think I loved you long before I met you." That night, they sat by the fireplace. Old drawings spread between them like puzzle pieces to a life they never realized they had already started building. Evie realized that sometimes the heart remembers what the mind forgets, that the souls of two people can pass each other on different roads again and again until one day they both turn the same direction. But life doesn't give stillness without testing its strength. The next morning brought a letter, not handwritten, typed, clinical. It was addressed to Elijah from the Department of Family and Youth Records. Evie watched as he opened it with shaky fingers. Inside was a copy of an old document, his birth certificate, and an attached note. "We've recently digitized several archived adoption files. This came up as part of a shared family search. You have a half-sibling, born 1 year before you, abandoned at a separate shelter, name Evelyn Monroe." The world went silent. Evie sat down slowly, blood draining from her face. "That's not possible," she whispered. "No, that can't be right. It's my name." They stared at each other, hearts pounding, minds racing, but neither could look away. "No," Elijah said firmly, pushing the paper aside. "This can't be. It's a mistake." Evie stood, trembling. "But what if it's not?" He came to her, placing his hands gently on her arms. "Evie, even if we share blood, even if fate played a twisted hand, we met again for a reason. We're not siblings. We would have known." She shook her head. "What if we didn't? What if we loved each other before knowing the truth? And now it ruins everything." "No," he said again, voice stronger this time. "It doesn't ruin anything. Love isn't ruined by blood or name. It's built on choice. But how do we live with the doubt?" She whispered. He stepped back, breathing deeply. "We find the truth. We don't run. We don't guess. We face it." Together, they contacted the agency. DNA testing would take 2 weeks. 2 weeks of questions, of distance, of pain they hadn't invited but couldn't escape. Evie moved temporarily back to her small apartment in the city, not because she wanted space but because she needed clarity. She needed to remember who she was. Before Elijah, before love blurred every line. During those 2 weeks, Elijah sent her a message every night, not asking for answers, just sharing memories, one each day. "Remember the robin that followed you? It still comes. I found the toast you burned in the freezer. I couldn't throw it away. Your painting is still on the easel. I look at it every morning. If I had to do it all over again, I'd still choose the girl behind the painting." And Evie sent one message back. "Even if we share blood, no one ever shared my heart the way you did." On the 14th day, the results arrived. Evie sat alone in her apartment, envelope in her lap. She called Elijah. "Are you ready?" she asked. "No," he admitted, "but I want the truth with you." They opened their letters at the same time, and what they found stunned them both. Inconclusive. They were not ruled out as siblings, but not confirmed either. There were too many gaps, missing pieces, inconsistencies in records. The test, based on limited data, couldn't give a definite answer. They were left in limbo. But something in that moment changed, because uncertainty didn't bring fear anymore. It brought clarity. Evie stood in the middle of her apartment, letter in hand, and whispered to herself, "What do I know for sure?" And her heart answered, "I know he never hurt me. I know he saw me when no one else did. I know he held me when I felt like disappearing. I know I have never felt more whole than I do when I'm with him." That night, She returned to the lake house. Elijah opened the door with eyes full of questions. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Evie stepped forward, held up the letter, and then tore it in half. "We may never know the full truth," she said, voice steady, "but I know who I am with you, and I choose that." He closed his eyes, overwhelmed. "And if the world asks questions we can't answer," he asked softly, "then we answer with the only thing that ever mattered," she said, "love." And this time, when he held her in his arms, it wasn't out of protection or pain, that it was out of peace. They found the journal by accident, that it had been a quiet Sunday morning. The air smelled like pine and cinnamon. Evie had baked, even though she barely touched the flour. Elijah had been organizing old boxes from the attic, finally sorting through things he'd once refused to face. She heard him call her name from upstairs, not urgently, but with a kind of stillness that made her heart skip. When she reached him, he was sitting cross-legged on the wooden floor, holding a cracked leather-bound book. Dust clung to its corners like it hadn't been touched in years. On the cover, faint gold letters read, "For my son." Evie knelt beside him. "I've never seen this before," he said. "It was buried under some of my father's old files." They looked at each other, then opened it, and what poured out wasn't just memories. It was her voice. His mother's voice, soft, broken, brave. Each page told a story not of a woman who gave up, but of a mother who fought quietly in a world that never gave her permission to speak. "I was 19 when I had you, Elijah," one page began. "I didn't have a crib. I used a laundry basket padded with towels. You didn't cry much. I used to wonder if you were born already knowing silence." Evie blinked back tears as Elijah kept reading, page after page, story after story. "I painted when you slept. That was the only time I remembered who I was before diapers and bruises. Your father didn't like art, said it was for dreamers. But you used to sit beside me and smear your fingers in the blue paint. That's how I knew you felt safe. You trusted color more than words." They reached a page that had a folded envelope taped to it. Evie carefully peeled it open. Inside was a letter addressed not to Elijah but to her. "To the woman who loves my son," she gasped. Her fingers trembled. Elijah touched her arm gently. "Read it." She did. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if you're with my son, then somehow, some miracle, he let someone in. Thank you. From the corners of my heart that never healed, thank you. My son was born into a world I could not protect him from. But I prayed every night, that someone would someday see past the silence and the stone and find the soft child who used to press blue paint onto my palms just to make me laugh." Evie stopped. Her throat closed up. Elijah leaned forward and continued reading for her. "He will push you away, not because he doesn't love you, but because he's terrified you'll leave first. Please stay. If he loves you, he'll be scared of you. That's how you'll know it's real." Tears slid down Evie's face. The letter felt like a bridge between them and the woman who had shaped everything quietly. Invisible. In that moment, Elijah wasn't a millionaire. He was a son, and Evie wasn't a wife. She was the answer to a prayer written before she ever knew his name. Later that evening, they lit a candle in the living room and placed the journal beside it. Neither of them spoke much after that. Some moments don't need words. Some truths settle not in the mind but in the heart. But just as peace seemed to return, the past knocked again. A letter arrived from the foster care agency, this time addressed to Evie. Another old file had surfaced, a hospital record, a nurse's note, and tucked inside it, a photograph. Evie sat down on the porch swing and stared at the picture. It was of a woman with long, dark hair, a tired smile, holding a baby in a blue blanket, and standing beside her a little girl with a paintbrush in her hand. Evie recognized herself. She was maybe 3. She flipped the photo over. Marisol Rivera and her children. Elijah 6 months and Evelyn 3. Last known record 1998. Evie's breath caught. Rivera, not Monroe. Rivera had been her mother's maiden name. Her knees buckled. She sat frozen until Elijah found her minutes later. She held out the photo in silence. He took one look and sat down beside her. "She was your mother too," Evie said softly. "I don't understand," he whispered. You were taken by your father. I think so. He must have taken me when I was still small. Changed my name. I don't remember her, only pieces, shadows. I always thought they were dreams. She must have lost you, Elijah said, voice breaking. She must have spent her life mourning you while raising me. Evie nodded, tears falling now. We're not strangers, she whispered. We're family, real family. He placed the photo gently in her lap and said the words that shook everything. But I still love you. She looked up, startled. I don't mean romantically, he clarified. Not now, not with what we know. But I love you deeper than that. Beyond what this world understands. You were my miracle before we had names for each other. You were the person who saw me as a child when no one else did. Then you became the woman who saved me again. And I will never stop loving you. Just differently now. She cried harder because she understood. Sometimes love doesn't vanish, it simply shifts its shape over the next few weeks. They redefined everything. The marriage was annulled, but not with bitterness. They remained in the lake house in separate rooms, still cooking together, painting, laughing. They told the world it was a brief, quiet separation. But to each other, it was a gentle unfolding of a story meant to end one way and continue in another. Evie started working on a new art series titled Unbroken Roots. Paintings of found families, of light in broken houses, of hands reaching, not to hold but to steady. Elijah began building a new branch of his foundation, one dedicated to healing children from fractured homes. He named it the Rivera Project. They gave interviews not about their love story, but about the deeper truth behind it, about how some stories aren't meant to be traditional romances. Some are divine reconnections, soul-deep alliances, the kind that rebuild generations, and through it all, they stayed close, closer than most couples, more honest, more whole. One day, while walking through a park together, Evie saw a little girl sitting alone, sketching flowers on a napkin. She walked over, knelt, and smiled. That's beautiful. The girl looked up. No one ever says that. Evie glanced at Elijah. He smiled. Then we'll be the first. And just like that, the cycle began again. Love, in a new form. Still sacred. Still strong. Still everything. It was always meant to be. Asterisk. It started with a phone call neither of them expected. Elijah had been preparing for the Foundation's first national conference. Evie was finishing her Unbroken Roots gallery, finally painting again in bold, fearless strokes. Their lives had grown full, not perfect, not always easy, but whole in a way that didn't depend on titles or definitions. He was no longer just the billionaire, and she wasn't only the girl who had once spilled tea on his shirt. They were family now in the rarest, truest sense. Then the call came, a quiet voice on the other end. This is Dr. Rivas from the Phoenix Children's Hospital. I believe we've located someone connected to Marisol Rivera. Evie froze in the studio. Her hands, once streaked with paint, went cold. You're certain? She whispered. We're running DNA now. But she says her name is Camila. She was placed in care after her mother's death. She remembers to name Zevelin and Elijah. The phone nearly slipped from her fingers when she told Elijah. He didn't speak for a long time. He just stared at the wall, blinking hard. Another sibling. Another thread of their mother's legacy. Still alive. They flew out the next morning. Camila was 19, thin, quiet. Her hands always curled into her sleeves, and her eyes held a weight, far older than her age. But when she looked up and saw them both enter the room, she gasped like she'd known them all her life. I used to pray someone would come for me, she said, voice shaking. Even when they told me no one was left. Evie hugged her first tight and trembling. Elijah followed, placing his hand gently on Camilla's back like he was holding something fragile and sacred. They didn't ask questions that day. They just sat with her, ate soup, told stories, let silence speak where words would fail. In the weeks that followed, everything changed again. Camila moved into the lake house. And just like that, the home transformed. She wasn't just a missing piece. She was a reminder that family isn't found in blood tests alone, but in staying, in showing up, in listening even when it hurts. One rainy night, Evie found Camila curled on the couch, sketching in one of her old journals. She peeked over her shoulder and saw it, A drawing of all three of them young, in the arms of their mother. Marisol smiling. You remember her, Evie whispered. I remember her singing, Camila said. Her voice a whisper. She used a hum when she braided my hair, and she smelled like jasmine tea. Evie sat down beside her. I used to think I was alone, she said. Camila looked up. I thought I'd never be chosen, that no one would believe my story. But Elijah, he did. And you know what changed everything? Camila shook her head. The moment he saw the blood on my wedding night. Camila blinked, confused. Evie nodded slowly. I was terrified. I thought he'd walk away, but he didn't. He stopped. He sat beside me. He saw pain and didn't run. That's when I knew. He was the one person in the world who saw people, not status, not past, not scars, just people. Camila didn't respond at first. Then she whispered, do you think she'd be proud of us? Elijah, who had quietly entered the room with cocoa in hand, answered without hesitation, she already is. He handed them the mugs and sat down on the other side of Camila. And for the first time, the three of them sat as siblings, no longer broken, no longer searching, just together. Months passed. Evie's gallery became a nationwide tour. Elijah's foundation won awards for its impact on trauma-informed care. Camila enrolled in art therapy courses and began teaching workshops for foster youth. But one moment outshined them all. The day they opened the Rivera Center. The building stood tall, overlooking the city skyline. Inside were classrooms, studios, support offices, and a large mural painted by Evie and Camila of three children holding hands beneath a glowing tree. Roots stretched deep beneath them, and the trunk shimmered with flecks of gold leaf. At the center, a plaque read, dedicated to the children who were never broken, only waiting to be seen. On opening day, Evie gave the speech. She stood at the podium, the wind lifting strands of her hair, her voice clear and full. I once thought my story was something to be ashamed of. I believed that pain made me unworthy and silence meant survival. But then I met someone who didn't flinch at my truth. Someone who sat beside me when I bled, not just physically, but emotionally. And that act, that one human moment, changed my entire life. She paused, scanning the crowd. I am not the girl I used to be, because I was finally allowed to become the woman I was meant to be. And now, together, we are building a home for every child who thought no one would come. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Not because of wealth, not because of fame, but because they had just witnessed the real story. One not of fairy tales or perfect endings, but of courage, of grace, of family, found in the ashes. As the sun dipped low, Elijah stepped up beside her, not as her husband, not as her boss, but as her brother, her friend, her lifelong ally. And Camila joined them, placing her arms around both. 3 lives, 1 journey. Unimaginable pain transformed into unshakable purpose. Later that night, under string lights and music, a reporter approached Evie. What do you call what you've built? She asked. Evie smiled softly. A love story, she said. But you're not married anymore, the woman pointed out. No, Evie answered, eyes warm. But love doesn't always look like romance. Sometimes it looks like healing, like staying. Like choosing people every single day, even when you no longer have to. And with that, the final chapter wasn't really an ending. It was a beginning. A life where every scar became a map, and every moment of pain, a light pointing the way home.